I need to be able to go back to my people and tell them that this president is committed to civil rights, and that this bill, even without voting rights, will still be a strong bill with no further changes. If I can't do that, I'll lose their faith. And in their despair, I don't know what'll happen.
Is that a threat?
I don't want riots any more than you do. But in order to avoid that type of situation, I need to be able to deliver meaningful reform. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for being here. So I just want to open this by saying that 8 years ago, I'm dating myself here, I was at the Toronto Film Festival, and I saw this little movie that was blowing up, sorry for the pun, called The Hurt Locker, and everyone was talking about this man right here and Jeremy Renner. And here we are today, and I feel like this is the role that, I don't want to hyperbolize too much, but really you were born to play this role. And if I say so, it must be true.
No, it's very true. No, thank you. It's a role that I've dodged a couple of times. I was very nervous and apprehensive about the idea of playing Dr. King. I feel like that's a role that can make or break your career. You know, anybody can put on wings and fly, you know, but this was a whole different stratosphere.
Well, I had read an interview with you, or several interviews, where you said that for years you turned down scripts because you felt that you weren't prepared, or the scripts weren't worthy, or a combination thereof.
Right.
So what about this specific story at this point in your life connected with you?
Well, you know, a lot of people, I feel, don't get the idea of how radical Dr. King was. If you look at the speeches he was giving, the things he was saying, I always joke and call him the forgivable socialist, because the things he was saying, I mean, it screams of socialism. And as far as, meals for underprivileged families, affordable housing, the labor union conversations he was having, things like that. It was just really inspirational, the way he was looking at the world and the way he wanted to see the direction of this country go. And for me, he wasn't a passive man. He wasn't a man that was reactionary. I feel like a lot of the times I've seen him portrayed, you know, he comes across as very meek, very reactionary. Apologetic almost. And, you know, what was great about Dr. King and what I loved so much, Dr. King was a leader of men, you know, and he was a strong, bad man. And if you look at the things that he had to deal with, you know, the people he had to deal with, his inner circle, the whole Abernathy, Stokely circle, you know, to navigate through all those personalities, and then on the other side of the spectrum, go into the White House and navigate the reality of Kennedy and then, you know, LBJ. He was just a man of many different colors and many different attitudes. And I've never read a script that got that right until I read this script.
And the amazing thing about this script is that it doesn't gloss over his more human sides. I mean, the man cheated on his wife. That's part of the story.
Right.
He, you know, he was willing to dodge the voting, you know, to cut voting rights out of the civil rights bill to get it passed. So he's not this noble, larger-than-life person. You make him very human.
Well, and thank you. And that was one of the things we talked about from the beginning. When I first talked to the director, Jay Roach, our conversations was not, I want to do this movie, I love this project. I told him from jump, I do not want to do this movie. I was hoping this was a call about Austin Powers 4. But he, you know, because when I pitched him my idea of Dr. King, I wanted him to be steadfast. I wanted him to be earnest in the idea of change. And I wanted him to be a badass. You know, if you're very honest with yourself and you think about the way you perceive the world, there's a certain perception that comes along with men. And the very fact that the average height of the president is 5'11", it tells you that height and stature plays in the perception of a man when you walk in the room. So when you're in a room and a guy walks in and he's 5'6", next time that happens, clock in your mind what you think. And the next time you're in a room and a guy walks in and he's 6'2", clock in your mind what you think, and then think about that guy being a leader of a movement that changed the face of the world. Dr. King was 5'7" with shoes on and 3 pair of socks, So that being said, I felt like there had to be something about the man to overcome all the obstacles that were placed in front of him to do what no one else was willing to do.
And what do you think that was? How did you actually, before we go there, how did you get to the essence of who he was?
I read 2 really amazing books. My brother Tavis Smiley wrote this book called Death of a King, and it literally chronicles the final 365 days of Dr. King's life. And it's amazing the insight and depth he was able to get of Dr. King's personality. And then there's another book called Bearing the Cross. And those 2 books really didn't shy away from the imperfections of Dr. King. I think one of the things that makes him such a unforgettable figure in American history or world history is the fact that he was flawed. A great man is not a man who is judged by his flaws, but a man who becomes successful in spite of his flaws. And, all of his shortcomings led to him being relatable. I think in this day and age, we're all like, skeptic believers. It's like, oh, Dr. King was great, but he, and I just feel like that diminishes the greatness of what this man was able to do. And the same thing with LBJ. I grew up with all these crazy, notions and teachings of who LBJ was and how he was a wild racist and this, that, and the third. I'm like, all right, if you look at the Emancipation Proclamation, nothing happened in the way of civil rights until 1964. And there were a whole lot of presidents in between there. So if he had to be a racist to do that, I'm happy he was a racist.
And in terms of Dr. King, he was a pragmatist, which I think I urge all of you guys, by the way, to watch this because it drives home just how relevant and how this is today and how recently all this happened. Yeah. Because we like to think that we've always had voting rights. It's always been,
Well, the Supreme Court just butchered. I think this movie is so, I always joke and say this movie should be called The Great Compromise because we live in a society where the art of compromise has been lost. LBJ was amazing in many different ways, but if you know anything about politics, he controlled the Senate in a way that no one will be able to ever again. I mean, he came through the Senate like Phil Jackson and the Lakers. I mean, it was amazing. And because of that, when he became president, he did more in 4 years as a president than most presidents do in 2 terms. And what a lot of people don't get at, when Kennedy was assassinated, LBJ basically had eight months before election. And in those 8 months is when he worked on the Civil Rights Act. And he said, we've lost, even though we've won this bill, we've lost the South forever. And ever since that, the South has been red, And what's so interesting about that and why I bring that up is because with LBJ, what he had was the ability to go to true bipartisanship, go to the other side of the aisle and say, listen, I know you're Republican, I know you don't want civil rights, but you want this. So you give me this, and I'll give you that. And the same thing with Dr. King. Dr. King said, I wanted civil rights and I wanted voting rights. LBJ said, I can't give you voting rights now, but I can give you voting rights later, but we need to get civil rights now. So King was going back and forth between, his constituents and LBJ and making sure that that worked. And their relationship was so interesting because King said to LBJ, I won't go out in support of you, but I'll definitely go out against Goldwater. And Goldwater is kind of amazing because we're living in a Goldwater election right now.
It's almost meta when you talk about it, right?
It's scary when you watch Goldwater speeches and the things he's saying and you watch CNN today. So, I just wonder who's going to step up and be the king of this election.
Well, and in terms of playing king, I know that when you play not just a real person, but someone this iconic. There's a difference between mimicry, which a lot of people can do, and really getting under that person's skin. So what was your process like for doing that?
Well, it goes back to what you said earlier, the essence. I didn't want to put on prosthetics and a fat suit because I feel like that would have been disrespectful to the legacy of Dr. King. Dr. King is one of the only men in history where it's not so much about how he looked. He's remembered by his actions. So I wanted to capture the essence of Dr. King through his actions. His story is the work that he did, not me trying to look like him. I was in Atlanta shooting Captain America when I heard about this project. And fortunately, my brother is a graduate of Morehouse College where Dr. King went to school. So I went over to Morehouse and they just walked me through the gauntlet of Dr. King 101 and even sat me down with men who had marched with Dr. King. And it was amazing and eye-opening how passionate and how aggressive of a man he was when it came to basically the future of this nation and the rights of not only black people, but women, Native Americans, gay and lesbian. It was phenomenal to see and really hear his speeches for the first time. You know, I feel like a lot of people stop Dr. King at "I had a dream." Like, that's who he is, you know, but his small speeches, his church speeches, his pickup truck speeches, those are the ones that were amazing and so radical. And I think that's why people kind of gravitated to him.
We all know, or we think we know who he was as a person. What surprised you the most about him when you did the research?
How cool of a brother he was. You know, it's funny, you think of Dr. King, he's like, hey, you know, I have a dream, and these great oratory speeches. And then it's funny because looking at him, you know, in a way, it's a lot like, I hate to say it, Barack Obama, and a lot like George Bush, to be honest. George Bush got elected, and they asked everyone, who would you rather be the president? You know, Bush or Gore. And they were like, Bush. And I'm like, why? Because I'd like to have a beer with him. You know, and it was the same thing with Dr. King. Dr. King was the guy who can, you know, hang out in the neighborhood, shoot some pool, have a beer, smoke a cigarette, and talk to you about things in the neighborhood, but then get up on a pickup truck and give a phenomenal speech about the times that we were living in and how it should change. And I was really surprised hearing the stories and seeing the pictures of just how cool of a cat he was.
And speaking of George Bush, it's actually funny when you read interviews now with people who met him. They're like, oh yeah, regardless of what you felt about his presidency, he's a really cool dude.
Yeah.
He remembered my name 10 years later.
A friend of mine, I was recently the king of Mardi Gras, and one of my, I guess, helpers, guides, his son suffers with autism. And this kid, I mean, has a mind like a whip. One day he takes a picture with me and he takes out his phone, goes through his phone. He's like, look who I met. It's a picture of him and George Bush. I was like, wow, that's cool, man. He's like, yeah, this guy was an awful president, but man, wasn't he really cool? This kid was like 16, you know? Yeah, I'm like, yeah, he's pretty cool. He told me this whole story about him and Bush and how they hung out. And, you know, at the end of the day, Bush shook his hand and gave him a pen. That's when a week later, Bush invited Bush to his, like, his thing, you know, with his autism is like, you know, why don't you come to my house? You know, come to my house. I have a great house. But no one ever comes to his house. So a week later, Bush is in New Orleans. Bush go to the dude's house. I'm like, that's amazing. Obama never came to my house.
Or, well, don't feel bad. He's never been in mine either. I don't think he does Brooklyn.
Nah.
But we can't talk about this movie without talking about Bryan Cranston, who your relationship with him is the linchpin that this whole movie is based on. Without the chemistry that you guys have, none of this would work.
Yeah.
So how did you guys, first of all, know each other before this? And how did you build that relationship?
No, I didn't know him at all. I had recently done a movie with Aaron Paul, who was on Breaking Bad with him. And I will tell him you wooed. And when I heard I got the project, I texted Aaron. I was like, yo, what's Bryan like? And he just gave me a rundown of how cool Bryan was. So the first day I showed up, it's acting is weird. It's a difficult negotiation at times. You don't know what the other person is like unless you've worked with that person. So I didn't want to step on any toes. You want to run lines, you want to rehearse, anything like that. I just stayed back. And it's interesting. I feel like the quintessential moment of my relationship with BC was I'm on set one day and I have a phone scene where I'm supposed to be talking to LBJ on the phone.
Wait, is that the one where he puts you on hold and then he's like, oh, look me up in the White House sometime?
Yeah, which he was notorious for. And Cranston was supposed to go to London to do press for Trumbo because Trumbo was blowing up, Cranston was blowing up, everybody was blowing up. So he was supposed to leave that morning and I was supposed to do my scene with like a PA on the phone with, awful acting. And we go through the morning, do our first scene, go to lunch, come back, it's time to do the phone scene. And Cranston walks on set. Everybody's like, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be in London. He goes, no. I read the schedule and saw you guys were doing the phone scene. So I changed my flight so I can come in and do off camera for Anthony. I know dudes that haven't done a Coke commercial that wouldn't do that.
Yeah. I was about to say that, you guys need to know how rare that is.
And that is phenomenal for him. When he did that, I was like, oh, I got to give you a nickname. You my boy for life.
BC it is.
That's my BC. BC.
What was your first day on set like?
It was awful. No, because it was awful. My first day I show up, and they put you in a suit and all this stuff and put the stuff on and the stuff. And I'm doing my most important scene as Dr. King on my first day. And it's not supposed to be like that. On your first day, you're supposed to walk down the street or, get out of a car or, something to break you into the mold. But literally, I get 3 pages of dialogue on a couch in the room with Cranston, my first day. Action. And it was awful. But it went well. It was actually, I don't know if it was, Jay Roach's intuition or just his genius as a director, but the back and forth between Cranston and I, the nature, that double dutch of us doing the scene works with the climate of the scene where we were supposed to be as LBJ and Dr. King, because we were filling each other out. Because
you guys have an antagonistic relationship, but yet mutually codependent, because neither would work without the other.
Right, and I wouldn't say it's an antagonistic relationship. It's more of I think it's Ali Frazier. When you get 2 heavyweights in a room, both of you can hit hard. So there's that mutual respect. And it's a negotiation. It's a dance. And I think what's really great is you get to see it. You get to see 2 highly intelligent men spar, and feel each other out. And I think the scene works beautifully. And I'm proud of it. I'm very proud of this movie.
As you should be. I mean, this movie is, like I said, it's astounding how timely and relevant it is, even though it happened, I can't do math, you tell me, how many decades ago?
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people don't look at the stuff that LBJ was able to do in his period as president. He did affordable housing, Medicaid, Medicare, civil rights, voting rights.
People look at the Vietnam War, and that's what
the Vietnam War.
Associate them with.
I mean, and it's so interesting. Right now, what are we fighting about? Black Lives Matter. That sounds like civil rights. Oh, free health care. Oh, that sounds like Medicaid, Medicare. Oh, and it's the same
voting
thing.
Rights and
voting rights.
Yep.
I mean, the Supreme Court just gutted the Voting Rights Act a little bit over a year ago. So, and now what they're doing is they're setting up precincts where you have to get an ID to vote, but they're closing all the places to get IDs. So if your grandmother wants to vote, you mean to tell me she's gonna drive an hour and a half to find an ID place, to get an ID, to drive back an hour and a half to vote? No. So it's the exact same thing. It's the exact same arguments that we had 50 years ago. It's just now everybody's so interested in tweeting about what they think, about what they feel, about what happened on Breaking Bad.
As opposed to doing something
about it.
Who's a politician today that you admire?
Oh, man.
We can come back to that in an hour if you want.
Sure, man. That's a great question. I'll ask you that. Who's a politician you admire?
I'll come back to that in an hour.
Exactly. I mean, it's, I think a lot of people forget that being a politician is...
Elizabeth Warren.
Really?
Because of her Twitter war with Donald Trump.
Really? All right, okay. I'll give you that.
Come on.
She's wildly intelligent. Okay, all right. I respect your mind. Look, the obvious answer would be Cory Booker. I feel like everybody is kind of like, for the past 5 years, he's the guy. And unless he does something really dumb, he's the guy. There's nobody, if you look at the Republican side of the field, the people that they're saying is the guy, all those guys suck. They thought the governor of Louisiana, Bobby Jindal, was the guy. And he gave one speech, and they said, that's not the guy. Barack Obama was really, nobody knew him. He gave that speech at the DNC, and everybody said, he's the guy. Everybody saw it, everybody knew it. Bobby Jindal, they said, he's the guy. He gave the speech at the RNC, and you never heard from him again. It was like a hush came over the crowd. He gave a speech, and one person in the audience was like, for real? All right.
All right.
But I think, I would say Cory Booker is the obvious choice because he does things in an unconventional way, and he's just like that guy you want to have a beer with also.
And last question before we turn over to the audience. When did you know, I know that you didn't have a lot of time to prep for this movie. When did you know that you'd gotten it right? Gotten him right?
I would say this is probably the most insecure I've felt in my adult life. I thought, I had gotten past this phase of my life where I hide in a corner and ask if it's okay to come out yet. And I don't know if I ever really got it. There's a scene in the movie where I give a speech to a crowd about Goldwater and the election. And that day, I felt like the essence of him was somewhere in me. I felt like everything that I believed Dr. King was, everything that I was trying to portray, I had somewhat found. But, it's so much. It's so humbling when you're faced with so much. Because, Dr. King, like Bob Marley or like Jimi Hendrix or like Tupac, live in multiple realities. They live in a reality of who they actually were, the reality of what the press says about them, and the reality of what they put into the ethos says about them, So you have to be confident in the fact that 66% of the people that see this is going to hate you because you're not going to get all three of those. So I think once I decided I was okay with failing, I captured an essence of him, that insecurity and that willingness to fail was something that I tried to harness and use to find him.
And now for our audience.
How's it going, Anthony?
What's up, big man?
How's it going?
No doubt.
My question is, do you ever reflect back on your past roles and think, you know what, I could have done this better, I could have done that better? And if so, how do you tackle that?
Great question. I do. I never think of it in a way of I could have done this better or I could have done that better. Whenever I love to watch my movies. I love being on an airplane and because I always have 2 or 3 movies on the airplane, and I only do movies because I love them. There's always something about a movie that makes me want to do it because as an actor, you have to sacrifice so much of your time in your personal life to do it. So I never look at, and once it's out there, it's out there. If it's bad, I'm bad forever. I don't care. Boom, sue me. Come back up to me, I'll give you your $10, we even. But I never look at it as right or wrong, good or bad. I always I know people with jobs. My dad was a roofer for 42 years. I know how hard it is to earn a living. So to get paid to do what I love, I never question it. I just enjoy it.
Anthony, thank you for being here.
What's up, man?
Fortunately, I'm blessed to have the same birthday as Martin Luther King, so it's an honor. So I was wondering that I'm looking forward to the show.
Thank you.
What was your favorite quotes out of him? All the quotes that he had, and how would you summarize it to the next and current generation?
Great question. I know, and I'm a butcher it, and I'm a paraphrase. Dr. King once said, he said, it's on the wall at the monument in D.C. A man is not measured by what he does in times of convenience, and a man is not measured by what he does in times of good and convenience. He's measured by what he does when the shit hits the fan. Basically, is to summarize.
That's exactly what he said.
That's exactly what he said.
Verbatim.
That's why he's Dr. King and I'm Anthony. But I think that's very true. You know, it's when I look at my life and the things that I've been through, I've had some pretty dope high times, but I've also had some drastically insightful low times. And my friends are my friends because of the way they acted when I was here, not when I was here.
And we have time for one more question.
Hello, Anthony. Good to see you here. Right here in the front.
Oh, you ain't stand up. The dude stood up.
Well, I'm in the front.
Stand up. I mean, yeah, there we go. Hey.
He's Martin Luther King, man. Listen to the guy.
Great shoes.
Oh,
by the way.
thanks.
Great shoes. Those are quite nice.
Thank
quite
you.
Nice.
I wanted to say, Dr. King left such a legacy behind that everyone can be inspired by, young, old, man, woman, black, white. I wanted to know, what do you want your legacy to be?
Wow. Didn't want to ask nothing else. Just go right to that. It's ironic because I've thought about this. I want my legacy to the one thing I learned by doing this movie, and the one thing I always think about when it comes to just life in general is I want my legacy to be that I gave more than I took. Whenever, it's funny. Like I said, I'm lucky, dude. Nobody thought this dude from New Orleans would be that dude on that poster. Nobody. So when I meet young kids and when I meet, people who are trying to basically capture their dreams, I know how hard it is to believe in yourself when no one else does. And that's why I always try to do that extra thing. I always try to, if a kid comes up to me and he's like, hey, man, stop eating your po' boy and talk to me about Captain America. And I'm like, oh, God. Those little things go a long way because I met this woman who I've admired all of my life. And she is phenomenal, beyond compare when it comes to talent and what she's done for our community. I was hosting this award show, and I'm like, holy shnikes, she's right there. I'm the host. Everybody knows who I am. I'm going to go say hello. So I walk over in my little tuxedo, my little penguin suit, and I go, excuse me, Miss Lady, can I take a picture with you? And she goes, oh, what are you? And I say, what? I said, Miss, my name is Anthony Mackie. I'm the host this evening, and I would like to take a picture with you. And she said, you have a camera? I said, well, there's a gentleman with a camera there. And she goes, wait. And she turns to this other lady, and she goes, do you know him? And she goes, well, yes, he's the host of the show tonight. Okay, so he should be here.
No.
Should, mother. And I'm standing there like, Anthony, don't go capoeira, just chill out, just don't make the news, homie, don't make the news. Because as an actor, that's in your mind every day, don't make the news, right? So she goes, fine. So, I help her up, because she's an older lady. turned to the camera, she takes the picture, and she pats me on the back, and she goes, now enjoy your night, and sit down. And she sat down, and I walked away like, I wish my sister was here, because she'll beat you up, right? Because I can't fight girls. My sister have to fight girls for me. Been that way since elementary school. That's just how we roll. But you know, I've always lived my life with one thing in mind. People might not remember what you say, but they'll always remember how you make them feel. And ever since that happened, like, I've always wanted to, you know, go back and go, ha ha! But I can't now. I can't. That would be wrong. Like, mail a poster. I belong here. Started from the bottom. But we can't do that. We cannot do that. That's not right. Right? So I always keep that in mind. And you should always remember that. Sometimes, you know, open the door for somebody. Be nice. People always remember how you make them feel.
Not to mention the amount of time she spent disparaging you. She probably could have taken 100 pictures.
Took the picture.
You know?
Just took the picture.
Yeah.
Very
and
mean old
this
lady.
airs on Saturday on HBO.
The 21st.
The 21st. It is incredible. Everyone, please watch it.
Thank you guys for being here.